Hi, and happy Eid to Muslim people and everybody in the world. I'm Ella Rinti Ruslan, the chairperson of Temubual Suara Kreatif Kesenian Generasi Muda, or in English we call as a Voice of Young and Creative Minds organizations. Let me speak in the Malaysian language for the introductions before I begin the conversation with our special guest today. Uh, Jadi siapakah tetamu jemputan kita pada hari ini? Beliau merupakan seorang pengarah filem dan pengarah drama TV daripada Amerika Syarikat. Antara filem arahan beliau ialah Subject to and The Outer Wild. Beliau merupakan Mr. Philip Chidel. We are going to talk about film directing techniques. Here is the discussion forum. So tell us about yourself and your experience in film industry.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. This is always fun. It's so high out there to all you internet people that I can't see, but hopefully you're enjoying yourself. I am a filmmaker. I've been working in the industry since the 90s, basically. I used to live in Los Angeles working in film production in a variety of different ways, and including the bulk of my job was working as an assistant to a director for a long time. And that's where I learned how to get into directing and started to become a filmmaker after. And so I worked in movies like some Hollywood productions called Copycat and The Man Who Knew Too Little and Entrapment and like that. Actually, I didn't work that much on Entrapment. That was the end of my job there. But after I left that job, I wound up becoming an independent filmmaker, and I made a feature film. I moved up to San Francisco. My wife was working in the industry as well. She worked in the Shrek movies, and that's what brought us up to the San Francisco Bay Area. And but I was starting to make some independent films on my own. And eventually I made a film called Subject to, which is a feature film that got into Sundance and got worldwide distribution. And that just sort of reintroduced me to the Los Angeles people as well. And I've been balancing just independent small film projects for a while now. So I also teach as well. I used to teach at the Academy of Art University. Now I teach public high school in Marin County called the Marin School of the Arts, where it's a 4-year program for filmmakers.
Now, why did you decide to become film director?
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people want to start directing right away. Well, when they start loving film, they just want to go directing. And I wasn't one of those people. I come from a writing background. I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write novels and eventually write screenplays. And I realized that if I wanted to eventually write screenplays, why not start there? So I never really went the novel route. I just wrote, I was pursuing writing. And when I moved to LA right after college, I just wanted to get experience in the industry and just sort of see what it was all about and make a living while I was trying to pursue my writing. And then I got a job working as this assistant to a director that I had mentioned. And through working with him, I realized what directing really was. I never understood directing before. It was just some big cloud of something happens and a director does something. But working with him, I saw the day-to-day management of what a director can do. And I also learned, thankfully, I learned that the reputation or the connotation I had for directors was not a good one. Every director I had been exposed to before that, they were like just mean people. They were overstressed, not the best people in the world. So I didn't have a good impression of directors. But then when I worked for this person, he was a great guy and how to learn what directing was about, but also how to handle the industry on a high level, on a personal basis, and how you have to turn into a mean person in order to do a good job. And so by working with him, that's what sparked my interest in directing. And eventually, be an assistant for someone for so long. And it was time for us to go. We're still friends, but it was time for me to leave that job. And then that's when I started pursuing directing after that.
What are the styles of film directing, in your opinion?
The styles of film directing is a really good question. And there's a lot of different ways to answer that. One way, it's interesting. I think from a creative viewpoint, many styles we see everywhere in film and on TV. As a fan, we see, things are really wild and crazy with a lot of editing and a lot of cameras, or they're very sort of static and calm, maybe because of budget, maybe because of creativity, whatever. But for me, I think film directing comes down to two main styles of directing. One is a theatrical way, which is, this is, especially with older traditional films, this is more common. Not only did they not have the equipment that we have today, where everything now is lightweight and portable, and you could do so much now, especially digitally. But back then, everything came from a theater, like a stage theater background, where people, not everything, but a lot did. And when you stage a scene in front of a camera, it uses a lot of theatrical conventions. And those kind of directors tend to be really strong in that regard. They're really good with dramatic interpretation of the story. They're good at manipulating things in front of the camera to tell their narrative point. And they basically stage things for the camera and then film it. That's one style. Another style is more cinematic. And by the way, everyone's sort of a blend of both. It's not like you have to be one or the other. It's a blend. But the more cinematic minded people are people that are more into the camera, and they're really moving everything around or not. They use the camera to really tell their story, and the editing and cinematic techniques in order to really tell their story a lot more than instead of letting the action unfold in front of the camera, they create the action with the camera. And that's the way I look at it. Two different ways. Theatrical and cinematic is how I categorize it. It's not a professional distinction. It's just that's the way I view it.
What are the rules of film directing?
The rules of film directing. There aren't. You could. It's funny because as a filmmaker, I think one rule is that you should break all the rules.
Oh.
So, I believe in creativity and just going out there and making something new that will surprise us and shock us. There are a couple conventions that are pretty standard that everyone does. They call them rules. One is the classic rule of the 180 degree rule, or also known as crine. And that's just a rule to keep screen direction consistent and to help with the geography of the room. People are breaking that rule all over nowadays. I mean, it's style now, but it's pretty conventional. It's the backbone of telling a traditional story through the camera. Is one, you have an imaginary line that happens in the action, and you keep the camera on one side of that line. And there are ways to cross the line, and you could do that. Another rule that's played with all the time, especially nowadays, is something called the 30-degree rule, where basically, if you're going to have a cut, you should change the angle of the camera at least about 30 degrees. So, because like if I'm here and then I just jump into a close-up, that's a jump cut. It's the same angle. It's just closer. So it feels weird when you watch it. But if you're here and then you change the camera, like maybe now you're over here for the closer shot. Shift in the angle doesn't have to be mathematically 30 degrees. It's just a number they came up with. But that shift in the angle helps you to accept the perspective that we're watching, and it just feels invisible. It feels natural that way. And there are other conventions as well. But and actually, one thing I think that is probably a good rule to consider, it's not like a written rule or anything, but it's just a really good convention to get of, is get in the habit, especially nowadays where everyone is so used to with their phones just filming everything. Get into the habit of taking a step back from just jump to get to the height of the scene, to get the shot and move on. Don't try to pre-edit the movie in your head. Maximize allow enough activity to happen in the shot to get the most out of that camera setup. And then, you're still going to get other angles and stuff, but you're going to get coverage, and you're going to get the coverage so you could edit something and play within the editing room and find the shape of the scene in the edit. But get in the habit of maximize power of any individual camera setup that you have. That's a good rule to follow too. And
what are filmmaking techniques?
Filmmaking techniques. A few different ways to answer this one. Generally, like for a traditional dramatic scene, you would tend to start wide. You get the wider shot first, whether it's the master shot is ideal. You know, get the more difficult shot first. That's the wider shot, and get everything covered. And then, as you get your coverage, move in from there. Don't like start with a single on someone and then cut away to the larger shot of a two shot of them, and then cut away to a larger shot. Instead, you want to start wide and narrow down the action. Traditionally, that's one technique. And then there's general production protocol. Like typically you show up on a set and you block the scene. The actor, it might even be the first time you're with the actors if you didn't have the luxury of a rehearsal. So you're blocking the scene. You've got a map in your head of where you want the actors to be. You see how that works. Some will work, some of it's not. You need to stay fluid and work with the actors to find the more organic way. And you're blocking the scene to know where the action's going to be. From there, once that's solidified, now you light the scene, and the DP comes in with his crew, and they light everything. And while they're lighting, that takes a long time. You leave the crew do their work, and then you could work with the actors off the set and work with them and keep it going. And then once the lighting's done, come back to the set and you rehearse the scene. Now, you're not starting from scratch. They've done their homework. Hopefully you've been working with them off the set and stuff, but you run the scene to make sure that it's all working, and then see what other adjustments need to be made. And either the actors make an adjustment, the lighting needs an adjustment, or whatever happens. And so after that rehearsal, they tweak it. And then once they tweak it, then you shoot it. So block, light, rehearse, tweak, and shoot.
So what is the best eye shot?
The best 5 shots?
The best eye shot.
Is that what you said?
What is the best eye
Oh,
shot?
bird's eye shot.
Bird eye shot.
What is a bird's eye shot? A bird's eye shot is like a bird's perspective. So it's an above shot looking down. And yeah, that's pretty much what that is.
And what is your advice to young filmmakers, especially Malaysians, who wants to direct their films to comply with the international standard as a prerequisite for their films to penetrate the global market?
So big question. Advice to yours to penetrate the global market, things to keep in mind when they're making their film. Well, starting with the general term, first, well, let's see, how should I answer this? There's a lot to go in here. First of all, know what the market is. Know what you're aiming for, okay? Because we like to put words out there like the industry or the market or whatever, and then we throw out words like the Academy Awards or Cannes Film Festival or Netflix. Nowadays, because everything is streaming, and there's a lot of different streaming things. So the market is huge. There are a lot of different, and it's way beyond Hollywood. Hollywood and the LA-based area of filmmaking, which has dominated American filmmaking, and to a large degree the world, but there's a lot of pockets around to do with Hollywood, and to call it pockets is insulting to them. I didn't mean that, but there's a huge industry, and you got to figure out, as you're a filmmaker, where do you want to be in the industry? What are you aiming for? You could go away from the limelight and make some wonderful films for niche audiences or niche marketplaces, like the education market. Maybe you're making, which is entirely different than the theatrical market, which is entirely different than a television market or the online market. There's a lot of different places to go. So know what you're about when you're preparing for your project. Once you know where your project is aiming for, or what you're aiming for with your project, then you have to make sure you're meeting the standards for what that's needed. Obviously, if you do want to go the high-end route of the Oscars and all that stuff. You can't control you can't control Khan. You can't control any of that. So only focus on what you can control, which is the story you're making. And we're talking about narrative films here. Focus on that. Make sure you know your story. Make sure you're telling a good dramatic story, and you're using your creative and practical decisions to make that dramatic story as strong as you possibly can. While you're doing that, because frankly, making a good story, nobody's going to want to see it. You might be able to sell it, you might squeak by, but it makes things so much more difficult. And this is a rough business. It's really hard business. So if you're going to do it, take the time to do the work. I mean, and the work, not just like the filming, but the hard work of developing, of making sure that you're telling a good story that will resonate with people, that will speak to people on a heartfelt level, or whatever the impact is that you're going for with your story. Make sure you're delivering that. That's the conceptual approach. But then separately, there's the technical, and you want to make sure that you're giving it enough due attention that it can compete in that marketplace. Have good sound. That's for independent, for low budget films, sound is one of those things that even today is the most overlooked thing. And that is the first thing that will sink a film, is bad sound. You can get away more with sloppy camera work than you can with sloppy sound. Because the eye is very forgiving, ear is not. And so if you hear a lot of background noise, or it's just badly mixed, or, if you're struggling to hear it and it just sounds bad, you're not going to get anywhere. It doesn't matter if you've got a good story. So sound is one of those things that's commonly overlooked. There's other technical things as well, especially in this digital age. Make sure you put the finishing touches on your film. It's color corrected. It's a good mix with the sound. You have the technical aspects of it taken care of. So does that
based
answer
on
the question?
your experience, how to film a bird eye view?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Based on your experience, how to film bird's eye view?
Based on my experience, I'm sorry, I missed that last part. Oh, sorry.
How to film a bird's eye view? The bird's eye view.
How to film a bird's eye view? How to film that?
Yes.
Yeah. It depends on what kind of material, first of all, what you're filming. Like, for example, if you're filming like a house, from above, that's a big giant thing. You can't climb a tree to film that. It's too big. You might have a crane, you might have a drone. We can use drones nowadays. You could rig a camera. I mean, depends where you are and what you're filming. If you're trying to get like a valley, there's nothing to hang a camera on. It's too big. You're going to need a drone. But if you're doing something lower, you might have a bird's eye view of, hey, there's an alleyway in a city, and you want to look down in the alley. Well, maybe you don't need a crane or a drone. You could put the camera, you need some rigging in order to get the shot right, depending what you're aiming for, but you could attach it to, a fire escape or the roof of the building or something like that. It depends where you're filming. And then of course, actually, if you're filming something in a room, let's say here I'm in a room, if I'm looking at the desk, I might want a bird's eye view straight down. It's going to be a super high, but if you're going to be filming straight down, well, then you got to also make sure that there's no shadows there from, because you're blocking the light or whatever. There's some things to look at, but it depends on the extent of the bird's eye view. There's always some creative way to film it.
Okay. So to all audiences, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our social media, such as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, Pertemuan Suara Kreatif Kesenian Generasi Muda. And that's all our discussion for today. I hope to see you again, Mr. Phillips, and everybody. Goodbye. Okay, bye. We're done.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right.
can,
Are we still
end up-
recording? Are we done? Or
We're done.
okay.
Okay, bye.
Okay, well that was quick. I thought it was gonna be a lot longer.
Uh, I think that's enough of the questions.
So
Okay. Thank you.
okay, all right. Well, good. Hopefully you got what you needed. You're welcome, and thanks for having me. It was fun.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, bye.